All right, seed talk, stuff to make your seeds walk. You know what it is. I think you already recognize her. It's Divinity. She back in the place. She back in the
I'm
place.
back.
And I want to say this, a moment of disclosure real quick before we get started. And I talked to Divinity about this moments before we jumped on. Um, First and foremost, I have Divinity on the show because I'm trying to learn and I'm trying to help educate and I'm trying to teach and learn when it comes to trans issues. And I feel like I will be journalistically irresponsible if I did not have a trans human being or a trans person, you know what I'm saying, on the show speaking on behalf and advocating and empowering, the trans community, the LGBTQIA community. If I didn't have a person on there, that's irresponsible journalism. Um, Keeping that in mind, that's not the only time you're going to see Divinity. Divinity is not a prop that I'd be like, oh, it's time to talk about trans stuff, so I got to have her. No, I wanted to let Divinity know, like, I have other episodes, you know what I'm saying, that I want to have, you know what I'm saying, them on, you know what I'm saying. So I just want to put that out there, just a moment of disclosure, and that's being a responsible educator. And I know people like, oh yeah, you always trying to say you're an educator. I'm not trying to say I'm anything. I am. So this is what we do.
That is
So
what
we
it
got
is.
about 20 minutes. Let's jump into it.
Okay.
And we're gonna do a deep dive, no pun intended, because we're gonna talk about Leah Thomas, the swimmer.
Okay.
And I think that y'all are going to be a little bit shocked and surprised of how we come at this. And I just wanted to first start off. Um, I want to jump into it because people were talking about Leah Thomas, the person out of Pennsylvania, who just now won the championship in women's swimming, transgender woman. Um, kind of, I'm gonna leave a little bit of the facts in the back to begin with, because I want us to talk about it a little bit, and I want y'all to listen. And I'm trying to see if y'all did y'all Googles. It's the bare minimum to do your Googles, and it has a lot to do with what Divinity and I are about to say today. And with Divinity, the first thing that Divinity said when I said, do trans athletes have an advantage? First thing that she said, it's nuanced. So, and then I said, I don't know if you're an athlete or not. And tell them what you said.
I'm a swimmer. I was a professional mermaid and I dance. So
Yeah.
competing against women has been the entirety of what I do. Like I've always had other women who are mermaids and other women who are dancers. So that I had to outperform or outdo or shine as bright as. Um, and I think a lot of this conversation um, is nuanced on a couple different levels. Based on where the trans person who is competing against cis women, um, and I'm going to leave trans men out of this because we're simply talking about who women are competing against, at least for this part of it.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
anyway,
that's fair. Yeah,
um,
we don't want to get overwhelmed. Yep. Let's just talk about
right.
trans women. Yep.
Right. So, in that, there's a lot of different levels to this conversation. And as I'm not a professional athlete, this isn't something that I particularly spend a lot of my time in. However, what I'm hearing, I never hear grumblings or complaints when trans women are competing and they're losing. The issue seems to be when trans women are competing and they're winning. And when I hear these conversations, I'm thrown back into like the movie The Incredibles, where Dash wanted to compete in track and race, and they were like, "Well, you're a speedster, so that would be unfair." And then at the end of the movie, they finally let him compete, but like he's like gauging like how by how much should I lose by to make this fair for everybody. And I don't think that trans women reach the level of supers in terms of women and competing in sports. I don't think that trans women are these biologically advanced creatures that are just looking for an easy win. That I don't believe. However, when we get into the nuances of who specifically we are talking about in these specific instances, I see a lot of this with trans women who were white trans women who were athletes prior to transitioning. And then they think, oh, well, today I identify as a woman. And so I'm going to just jump into women's sports now. My issue with that, uh, is about uh, the hormones and the transition period. Like, how long have you been on hormones? Like, um, how long are you beyond your puberty stage? Like, where are you in terms of your hormone therapy? Because if you are at the beginning stages of your hormone therapy, girl, you've not broken down. You're still, you've still got all of your uh, physiological attributes from your previous life. So if you have not uh, done it, in my opinion, what I would say personally, as a person in transition, it was about 5 years on hormones where I noticed that my body was just completely different. Like, I was not the same as I was prior to that. But I went through full male puberty. I went through all of that. Some trans women have never done that. That's why I said that this conversation is nuanced and it really depends upon who we're talking about. The girl Leah that we're talking about, homegirl's only been transitioned for a year. And I don't want to diminish or minimize her transition. Her transition is what it is. The thing is, when you are still biologically, when your biology has not caught up with your dysphoria, it creates a optical issue, and it's an optics issue, um, one that people who are fear mongers professionally jump on, and then we're in situations like we're in now. So I'll let you riff off of what I just said and
Yeah,
hormones.
yeah. Here's a little bit that I found out from just quick Googles, and Wikipedia could be mistaken, but I don't know why it would be mistaken about this this fact, or assumed fact, because Wikipedia.
Mhm.
But it said that Leah Thomas, this trans swimmer, had lost at least once to a cisgender woman
Mhm.
in competition. And so the stat that gets thrown out there a lot is that they were ranked, like, I think something like over 200 and something, as a male swimmer. And then, just now, recently won number one as a woman swimmer, um, competing against cisgender women. So the fact that this person has lost against cisgender women before in that sport, it kind of says a lot to me.
Mhm.
And what you said is, when did they actually transition? Are they still biologically I don't even know what the correct term. I want naturally. I
Well,
just
you
want
can speak freely, and we'll adjust as we
yeah.
go.
I
But
mean, naturally, I want to say hormonally, are they a person who was born with a penis, or hormonally are they a person who was born with a vagina? And you basically what you're stating is it's nuance. It's like there comes a time where your body adjusts to the hormones you're taking, and you're no longer the person with the sexual organ that you identify with. I get that.
correct.
I get that from a scholarly level. I get that.
Right.
I get the scholarship of that.
But that's a gradual thing that happens over
Right.
time. And what I would say is like when I see people where I have an issue with it, because it makes me uncomfortable when I see it makes me uncomfortable defending it when I see last month you were competing in the men's competitions and this month you're competing in the women's competitions. What makes me more uncomfortable even further is when you were competing in the men's, you were not very successful. But now that you're competing in the women's, you are very successful.
Right.
Like
And
when these
you lost,
situations happen,
and you
that
lost,
is something. Hmm?
yeah, and you lost against a cisgender woman.
Right.
You know,
Well, see, and what
and,
that proves is that
well,
this trans woman is not infallible, or that she's not
right.
superior to all of these women that she's competing against. And it also proves that the conversation in and of itself is an insult to the women, the cis women who are athletes and who perform at their hardest every day. Against trans women and against other cis women. Like what you're saying is effectively you poor, like you're what is the word I'm minimizing? You're patronizing this athlete to say, oh, this trans woman is going to mop the floor with you. So this woman is just pathetic at her job. She did, like, we already don't take women's sports seriously, right? Women have been for ages asking for equal pay. People don't say anything. There's crickets. They're not podcasts happening about that. There's a black woman right now in Russia, like trapped, can't get to her family, can't talk to anybody. Most famous black basketball player in Russia is not allowed to come home. It's not a conversation happening like this one is.
No, and I think that's a part too, because I would make the argument, one way to look at it is trans women athletes actually even further threaten, women like Brittany Grimes from actually making a living if they're taking away spots that were socially designed, saying
They're
for,
not though. And that's the thing. Is like this is again the narrative of the fear monger.
if we actually, no pun intended, transition into a part of sports history where we're allowing men who identify with the penis that they were born with to transition at any time and not even have any rules attached to that, and then say like, we got, men transitioning and going into the WNBA to do what, Leah Thomas is doing in swimming. I can see how, based on how our society socially conditions us to provide civil rights opportunities for people or human beings who are born with vaginas as an equity or equality, opportunity. That's the way our society is set up. We would have to change certain things where we're actually here's my idea. Here's my idea. If we want to do this, I say for at least 5 years. 5 years. Or we might have to do it longer than that. Let's start a league where we just run the data. And anyone can play in the league. Anyone. But only the best who can meet the criteria to play in that league can play in that league. No matter if you were born with a penis or a vagina that you identify with, here's the criteria, and the best of the best play in this league. And then we'll see who actually, based on the data,
right?
Based on the sexual they were born with and identify with, who's excelling, who's not, and then take that data and say, okay, because here's the deal. First of all, we're taking on this whole transgender issue from a Eurocentric value.
Please say that. Oh
okay?
My God.
So if we go back to Africa, all we have to do is go back to Queen Nzinga. She had an army of all women, and they were beating men's butts. Okay, they were doing their thing.
This is what I mean when I say when you're talking about these trans women and or these cis women, these poor cis women having to compete against these trans women, you are greatly diminishing the strength of women and the power of women.
Yeah,
And
but
it just
here's
to
the other thing
me
I
is
want to say.
insulting.
We
Like
got to
I
understand that a lot of these rules are based on a European value system and metric system. And so
But
a lot of
isn't it
the
ironic that it's Europeans who excluded women from everything? Women were not even allowed to be in theater. Like that was a
well, you know,
thing.
I was going to get on that. I'm glad you touched on that because they play women roles. You know, that's where a lot of the wigs come in and stuff like that. But if you look at like something like the Negro Leagues was actually one of the first, if not the first, major league was professional for us and during
Mhm,
the segregated apartheid history of America to
mhm.
allow women to actually play in the Negro Leagues. They were playing.
I didn't
They
know
were
that.
playing. Yeah,
Yeah,
they were.
that's dope.
If you go to the Negro League Museum, that's why I tell people you need to go to actual museums because there's
Yeah.
stuff that they don't teach in schools and you can't read in a book. There are very prominent women in the Negro Leagues who got busy. They played. So
Right.
if we want to have these sports, we have to change the rules that it's all inclusive. The thing is
Hmm.
about European value systems and metric systems, they have been excluded feminine energy, women, and put the primary, focus on men because that's according to their system, that's the moneymaker. That's what generates funds. And women are segregated to a
And
certain.
historically for their culture, that's how it's
So if
been.
you
That's
if I
yeah.
mean we can even see that with the coaching staff. There is no empirical data that says that men are better coaches than women. But if you look at professional men's sports, you will see men coaching women. But if you go to the WNBA, the majority of coaches are men and not women, but the players are women. It just doesn't add up. So there is a disrespect,
Not
there.
only that, when you talk about the physicians who examine these people, Gabby, that gymnast, Gabourey, I don't know what her name is, but she was assaulted by the doctors, and all these people kept it quiet. Nobody said anything, and then when they spoke out, still, it's not this big story. And to me, the disrespect of never really acknowledging women's sports until you're trying to fearmonger to oppress another form of womanhood is really loud and clear over the conversations happening about this particular story.
Yeah, I think that we have to add on to what you said. Yeah, yeah, yep. Like even like yeah, like that's a good point. Like even the doctors and the physicians that are examining these people, qualifying, disqualifying them in women's sports. I haven't ran the data, but I'm pretty confident that the data is going to say that the majority of the physicians and the trainers are men training these women, but you don't see it on the other end of the
Training them,
majority of women
examining them,
training and being
assaulting
physicians for
them.
men. But here's the deal. Let's look at something like since you brought up gymnastics.
Mhm.
We have been socially conditioned to look at like the floor routine. The floor routine in gymnastics, there are a lot of prominent women in it. Now, if we were run the floor routine between men and women, cisgender men, cisgender women, or just whatever, well, let's just say cisgender, since that's how it's split up. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
I guarantee you that women would have an advantage because that's what we're socially conditioned to seeing. The Mary Lou Rittenhowers, the
I
what's the
don't
other
think
sister
that's true. I don't believe
when it
that to
comes to
be true
floor
because
exercises
I've I was in
and
gymnastics when
gymnastics?
I was
Oh, that's
young,
how
but
name
more to the
name.
point, I wasn't very good at gymnastics, but all of the young I was in actual gymnastics though, but the young men that were around me were
No, I'm
doing
talking about
backflips
where
and
do you go
somersaults
though
and huh?
for the floor exercises?
Well, what do you mean
Socially,
before
we've been conditioned
exercises?
that those are women that get busy and they dominate that.
I think our society makes that so, but I don't think women are
And
more
we're
apt to
saying
do
the same
that.
thing. We're saying the same thing. We're saying the same thing. We have been we've been taught to make believe that women dominate that aspects of gymnastics. Like
Right.
all the athletes that do the floor exercises and gymnastics, all my references are women, whether black or white. What's the
Right.
one sister who does the Simone? Is it Simone Biles?
Simone Biles. That's who I was trying
Yeah,
to think of. Yeah.
yeah, but she's dope. I can't
Mhm.
name a man who gets busy like them.
But see, when I was in school, when I was coming up, like my cousins, the boys I went to school with, all of them would just up and down the street just do somersaults, backflips,
Yeah,
like all of this crazy shit that I could never do. Excuse me,
just
all
like
this
most
crazy
boys
stuff that
can
I could
double.
never do.
But that's just like
Mhm.
saying, I mean, that's the same thing like most boys weren't known to double dutch, but they could.
No, but what I'm saying is, if we took those boys who were doing these flips and tricks
Mhm.
and all of this stuff and put them into gymnastics and made them apply
Absolutely.
that to an actual
But
Olympic sport,
you know
they
why they didn't
would
want to do it, though?
dominate. But
But
they
you know why they
don't
didn't
do
want to
it
do it?
because, well, it's perceived feminine.
Right.
It's the
That's my point.
perception of it being a feminine thing. And so to harken back just a little bit, I wanted to hit on the fact that the reason that I'm so opposed, because I am very opposed to people really getting in the way. Uh, if cis women in leagues have an issue with trans women, that's who I want to hear from. Everybody else with an opinion about it, to me, is really just at gaslighting, adding fuel to fires that don't need to be started. But the issue that I want to point out that nobody's hit on is the fact that transphobia, which is what this is, impacts and affects Black women more than it affects anybody else, including trans women. And so, Black women in sports all are already inundated with transphobic remarks from the public, from people all the time, people feeling free to make commentary about their bodies and how they look or how they don't look or how they should look, etc. Uh, Venus and Serena Williams, just to give one example. Another one that's not an athlete is Michelle Obama. Black women are constantly subject to our bodies being made to be masculine because they're athletic or so when you play the tape out, when you play this out and you start going down the line and saying, oh no, trans women can't compete, trans women are not allowed to compete here, this is the space that trans women are not allowed to inhabit, you open up the floodgates for genetic testing, for body exams, for prove to me that you're a cis woman type of type of energy. To any woman who loses to Serena Williams can then say, "Oh, I think she has a biological advantage over me because I don't think she was born a woman." These are hypothetical situations, but they're very much so where this conversation is headed. And I don't think people are really cognizant of that or uh, aware of what they're playing into. But the fear mongering about trans people is really like the thing that is going to, it's going, like, I don't understand why it keeps happening. I think that's what I'm trying to say. It's like, I don't understand why we keep, like, it's like every time the Republican Party like needs somewhere to go, they have to find an issue with a hated group, and trans people are just always this group. I was talking to a Trump supporter and I was telling him, like, he was saying he didn't understand like all this trans shit and all this old non-binary and blah 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 blah. And I was explaining to him that the way we understand genders of man and woman is a feature of colonialism. Like, prior to colonialism, that's not how it was. There were multiple genders in many indigenous cultures. And so when you came with your Bible and your white sensibility, you came to correct us and tell us how, oh, this is how it's supposed to be and this is what you're supposed to do. But in reality, we're getting back to understanding who we are on a ethereal level.
And they're
And when
copying us.
that
They are
part,
copying
that
us.
part.
So let me say something real quick because I want to wrap up in the next 5 minutes real quick, and we're gonna do a part two on this. when I think about this, I think about Ifa, and I think about Yoruba, and I think about Oshun, and I think about Ogun, and I think about Shango, and I think
And
about Yemaya.
Shumare.
Yeah, and I think about all the divine feminine, divine masculine, you know what I'm saying,
Do you
energies
know
that
who Oshumare is?
yeah. But
Oshumare is the one I
let
think,
me get
but
this
go on.
point out.
Okay.
We didn't dwell on the limitations of Oshun as a feminine, energy
Mm-hmm.
coming in the form of what we would say is a woman.
Right.
You feel me? We concentrated and focused on her power, which is invested in the water, which is sexuality, which
Mm-hmm.
is embedded in relationships. It wasn't about what she couldn't do. It was all about what she can do.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And the divine in African spiritual systems was always something that was non-binary, that what they would call help me out here um
Gender non-conforming. I think of it as an
hold on,
elevation
let
above
me
gender. Like
um
it's a transcendence of gender.
I don't know why I'm going blank here. It's the same thing. It's the same science behind, Prince. He was starts with an A.
Androgynous?
There you go. There was always that androgynous energy in the divine. You know what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying? And then when we manifest on earth, yes, there is a binary split, but the unison has always come with the child, or whatever we produce from us. And
Right.
what comes from it is never binary. It's always complementary duality in African spiritual systems. So
Mm-hmm.
what I'm saying is, to add on to what you're saying, I understand what you're saying. You know what I'm saying? Because it makes sense that when a woman, or a cisgender woman, or a woman who identifies with the sexual organ that they were born with, starts performing at this incredible way. Oh yeah, she act like a man. That's a dude. That's a tomboy. That's the European value system. That's the European metric system. Because the reality of it is, we are holding back specifically our young women who identify with the sexual organ that they were born with. We're holding them back because anytime they're too masculine, hey, knock that stuff off.
Right.
You're acting like a quote unquote dyke. You're acting like a
Right.
bulldog, or you're acting like a dude. Like, knock that stuff. Do you know how many generations of athletes, of physically strong women, even beyond, in addition to their ability for some women, you know what I'm saying, to carry life? And you know how many opportunities we're denying them because we're socially conditioned. Once a woman gets too physically strong, we say, hey, man, knock that stuff off. You're getting
Mm-hmm.
strong. You're looking like a dude now.
Nobody's
Like,
gonna want you if you look like that.
that's,
If you get too
but
muscular.
exactly. And that's what I tell people, who have that Eurocentric, value system. I raised all three of my children. I have two young men and I have a young woman. When
Mm-hmm.
it came to getting busy, I raised all three of my children the same. We all going to the boxing gym. We all playing basketball. We all playing
Right.
football. Now my daughter's name is Isis. If you want to go do some other things, once you live and man, go for it. Same with my young
Right.
man, go for it. But I'm telling you, if you come into this house as an intruder, every single body in this house is getting busy. And I will put, I got my odds against you. I mean, yeah, against you than against me, because if I come into your house, it's like, oh, it's only the men that can fight. Well, how many women we got in the house? Well, we got 5 women. We only got 2 dudes, but the 2 dudes is the only one that's fighting because the women can't do it. Man, I put I put the odds in my favor because we getting busy.
Right.
We're using man, woman, and child, and that is the reason why Europeans came into our nations and our communities, and they disrupted it with this binary stuff. We were egalitarian. Most of our civilizations and communities were egalitarian. No gender rules. It was based on your ability. Can you or can you not do it? Yes or no? It's based on an ability. It's not, oh, you're a leader because you were born with a penis you identify with. No, It was like, can you do it or not?
And two-spirited people were often the spiritual leaders. They were often the people who transcended man, woman, husband, wife, blah, 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 into I connect with the gods. I commune with the spirits. That is what my space is. And so, when colonialists encountered these creatures, these ethereal creatures who were not quite man, not quite woman, they didn't know what to do. So they just killed them. And so
Yeah,
that's not how you're supposed to be. And
yeah,
so connecting with that, relearning the language and that's what I was telling the little Trump supporter. I was like, you're irritated with the people trying to relearn a language that was literally stolen from them. So we now have a plethora of avenues to transition where people back then did not. And so with that comes, we have to learn how to language that. We have to learn how to differentiate somebody who is a transgendered woman from somebody who is non-binary and chooses not to identify with a gender, and figure out how do we incorporate them into our spaces. How
yeah,
do we, in a respectful way, incorporate these people into our spaces? And yeah, and that's, but by invalidating the womanhood of trans women. And I think that this conversation just opens the floodways for that to happen. Anyway, like people can then call Miss Leah a man because they're saying, well, I don't think a man should compete with a woman, but she's not a man. Now, whether she's been on hormones or not is really up to the NCAA. That's not my decision and not yours. Prior to this conversation, it was 1 year. Now it's 3 years. I would make it 5. I'm not in charge. But I'm also not a doctor. So I don't know. Maybe the other girls get, more results in 3 years. Maybe these new hormones are doing a lot. I don't know, but we're not having that conversation because everybody's just so busy on the talking point of this is a man competing against women. And I don't think that that's right. And then they preface this hatred with, I'm not against trans people. I believe everybody should be able to do what they want to do. I don't feel like, but then they say, but, or it's just that. And it's just like, Game of Thrones is a quote, and I use it all the time. I think it's really, really true. And it's everything said before the word but is bullshit. It's a lie.
yeah.
If I
Okay,
have to preface
we
this
got
with,
to wrap up, and I want to say
okay.
this. First thing I want to say, I want to acknowledge what I heard you say is, at one point I heard you say the people that should get a say first is cisgender women. That's
Yes,
what
the ones
that's
in the sport. That's who I want to
in the
hear
in the
from.
sport. Yes, that's what I heard you say, and I support that, and I appreciate you saying that. I really do. The second thing I'm going to say is this, which is probably going to transition into a part 2, and then we can go into what's the plan of action. Right now, how we socially condition our young women, you know what I'm saying, or women who are born, you know what I'm saying, cisgender. Right
Hmm.
now, the best women, cisgender women versus the best cisgender men, men, when they transition, are at an advantage now. Just
Hmm.
for the simple fact of how we socially condition women to hold back being masculine because they
Do you
might get
remember though, back in like the early 2000s, maybe late 90s, like in WWE and WWF, like the women would fight the men. Like China would have
that's fake.
matches
That's fake.
against men.
That's not
It's
fair. That's
fake,
fake.
but they're athletes. It's fake, but they're athletes. Are they not?
Yeah, they are. All I'm trying to say is
Sustain
Divinity.
real injuries in that sport, do they not? It's
I'm
not
just saying
real
how
fighting
the system is
boxing,
set up right
no, but
now.
it's
Yeah,
hmm?
I understand how the system is set up right now. If you're saying that cisgender women should get a say first, and let's focus it on the Black community, then
I
how
think
our
they should have the only say. I don't understand how everybody else has a say. Like
no,
that's
I
the
hear you.
thing
No,
that's
I hear
boggling
you.
my
No,
mind.
I hear you. I hear you. And I'm glad you said that. But I'm saying how our system is set up right now, like we didn't set ourselves back, I don't know how many years marginalizing cisgender women. That right now when men transition into women, they're at an advantage because we already set it up for women to be at cisgender women to be at a disadvantage from birth. We do that. We
So how
ridicule.
are trans women then at an advantage?
You said what
What
now?
is the then how are trans women at an advantage? What exactly is the advantage? Because I'm 5'6" and 140 pounds. I have met so
No, I
many
hear you. No, no.
women
Let
bigger
me,
than me,
let me
stronger than me.
contextualize. Let me contextualize it before we go to our plan of action. When we're talking about the best athletes in that said sport, you know what I'm saying? Then I will say that cisgender men who transition into women are at a disadvantage. Say, for instance, if any player in the NBA, the way that it's set up as a sport, a competitive sport, which is based on monetary revenue and all that, if any player in the NBA, male player, cisgender man, transition into a woman playing in the NBA, they would be at an advantage based on how it's set up right now. You'd have to go through at least 2 decades where we're doing trial runs in an experimental league, you know what I'm saying, where we're tracking data, and I would say at least 20 years so we can get people from birth and not marginalize them, not oppress cisgender women for being too masculine, not block them from opportunities, not saying they can't play certain sports. They have to play with the quote unquote girls because they're not as good as the guys. When we start eliminating terms like, oh, she plays like a dude when she plays really good.
But if she has to compete, okay, so if you're going into that, then that's an issue with the way that women are taught to compete, not an issue.
That's what I'm saying. We would have to, at this point, the way we teach cisgender women how to compete, they are at a disadvantage. They are. If you take LeBron James and put him in the WNBA right now, if he transitions, you give him
I think the problem with this conversation is I don't have any references for Black women or for women in the WNBA. I know a lot of NBA references, but I think we don't care about women's sports the way that we care about men's sports in this
and that's
country.
another thing about it too, that even sports is divided between the sexes. And I think, and I'm using the NBA because it's easy. I'm loud, no pun intended. But if we do like combat sports, then you can go by you can actually go by weight. And I would actually make the argument because that it will be a lot more, because you have a lot more strategy and technique. You can do grappling, you can do certain things. I would make the argument in combat sports that they would probably have a better, you know what I'm saying, a chance, and it could be way more competitive. But I still think you got to track the data for 20 years. You got to take a group of cisgender women seriously and not marginalize them and oppress them for being too masculine, and let them grow at their own pace and be safe in their own skin and their body and not hold them back.
I think that's the conversation. I really do. I think the way we teach people to compete in this country really is, because I think if you as a woman immediately see a man and think, oh, I can't compete against him because he's going to be so much stronger and better than me, then you shouldn't be competing at all against anybody.
That's why I was saying how the rules are set up. The rules are set up to only admire, celebrate, and recognize the masculine way to do things. Like it's the dunk. You know what I'm saying? It's your ability to knock someone over and run somewhere. There's so much other things like, there's finesse. There's all kinds of strategy.
Oh, God, yeah.
That has nothing, just because like Sue Bird, or I'm losing track, I'm sorry, of other WNBA players, just because they can't physically jump as high or not physically strong. That's nothing to do with their basketball IQ. Absolutely nothing to do with their basketball.
Not at all. Or the strategy, or how they come at the sport. Right.
That is strategy. But that's not how the game is made up. It's made up of a whole bunch of men who at times, many times, I'm not saying the women don't do it, but I
think our sporting situations, and particularly in men's sports,
it's made up of too many men, like in the NBA or NFL, who overcompensate with their physical ability, who have no IQ. Tom Brady's a perfect example. Tom Brady is a perfect example. He's not a physical specimen. He's not. And I'm saying is there
He
are
gives
whole
me very
hey,
Cro-Magnon energy.
listen, let's what'd you say?
I said he gives very Cro-Magnon energy, very
Yeah,
caveman.
but here's my point, and we can go to the plan of action because I gotta run.
Okay.
There are a whole bunch of cisgender women that are stronger than Tom Brady.
Yeah,
Facts.
dead ass.
Facts. But
This happens.
the system is made. Coaching staff. I'm not trying to take any props about from Tom Brady. He's dope. But what I'm trying to prove to you is he got a line to protect him. He got good receivers. He's worked on his mechanics. Man, if you've seen the pictures of Tom Brady coming out of college, this dude don't look like he should be doing anything but with his head in the textbook.
Mm-hmm.
Look like a little nerd. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? So, anyways, what's the plan of action as we move forward? I'll go first. The plan of action is, and I might steal a little bit of yours, is teach people how to play a sport or how to compete the same way, and don't hold them back based on the sexual organ that they were born with or they identify with. Teach them the same way.
Right.
To use what they got to get what they want. There's no such thing as a disability. It's different abilities. And
differently abled, right?
I mean, we learned that from Stevie Wonder and Ray Charles, right?
Oh, yeah.
I think Stevie Wonder is the greatest musician to ever play. And it didn't matter if he had a different ability that he couldn't see the keys that he was playing because he saw them in his head.
Allegedly.
Oh yeah, I heard that. I heard that conspiracy theory. I heard that. Imagine he had AIDS. Okay, yeah. Anyway, all right, yeah. But what's your plan of action? It's been dope. By the way.
So my plan of action is really about. I just want us to stop delegitimizing the womanhood of trans women and stop finding clever little ways of, or are they allowed in here? Or are they allowed in here too? Or are they allowed in here? Trans women are women, or women are women. And that goes from this to trying to say that the partners who love them are somehow no longer heterosexual because they're in a relationship with a trans woman. Like just the delegitimization of the womanhood of trans women is really what I want to be taken away from this. Like the stopping of that. Like that's not okay. Yeah, I think that's it. I think that's
Yeah, that was good. Hey, check us out next time. Make sure you get in the comments. I should have said in the beginning, we're gonna have to part 2 this. We'll talk to you soon. Divinity, tell them where they can find you real quick.
I'm on Facebook at Divinity Dello. And that's it for now. My YouTube is not up yet.
Okay. Hey, make sure you guys donate to our time and whatnot. $Logic Amen. I'll put in the comments Divinity's Cash App or Venmo if she has any way to do it. But yeah, love y'all.
$ pay Nikki D.
Oh, Say it one more time. Say it one more time.
Oh, $ pay Nikki D.
Pay Nikki D. All right.
There
Peace.